Hi, this is Brent with Trade Therapy, and welcome back to the Trading Couch. We're talking about NVIDIA, really our anchor in the entire semiconductor sector, and a big part of our top-down analysis on our Clarity Spotlight for SMCI last week. We started with a look back to May. At the time, we were talking about this death cross right here. It really got a lot of headlines. A big deal was made about NVIDIA's 50 moving average. We used the 55 crossing underneath the 200. And a lot of headlines, a lot of effort was involved. You can see a lot of volume coming in and sponsorship to the downside of the trade. Retail really sold this headline and professionals used it as liquidity. You can see that volume stepped up in here. Wall Street bought this dip. And ever since then, we've really seen participation beginning to expand. We're starting to see sponsorship on the long side. And as we get through this video and get into the daily charts, we'll take a look at volume. And really starts to show up when we look at the current weekly chart. You can see all of the moving averages are now supporting and in correct sequential order. You can see that they flattened a little bit and compressed right here, but volume beginning to decline as this check back hits rising supporting moving averages and volume beginning to expand as support comes in and buys up the dip right there. That's an example of expanding participation. When we get into the daily chart, we'll see some additional examples of it. But this death cross event was really just a liquidity event for professionals to come in. You can see that ever since then, momentum has really resided on the bullish side of this chart, and the volume behavior really matches sponsorship. And as pullbacks or activity expands, you see the support beginning to expand and support NVIDIA. So this is all indicative of a very healthy markup campaign where reaccumulation had just completed, profit was taken out of NVIDIA, and positions were reaccumulated. So we should expect to see sponsorship and support on the long side of the trade. We'll jump into the daily chart to get a little more detail on this and talk a little bit about cascading stops and potentially what might occur if the opposite or if a breakdown in NVIDIA were to occur, what that might look like. But if we jump over to a daily chart here, you can see we talked about sponsorship on the recovery of pullbacks. So as pullbacks begin to run out of steam, sponsorship coming in and higher volumes on the long side of the trade. That is indicative of demand greater than supply conditions taking hold, pushes higher, recruit more participation, checks lower, stay brief, and really run out of steam pretty quickly. The short-term moving averages are all now curling up and fanning out. These are all signs pointing to the long side of the trade and sponsorship to the long side of the trade. Although if we were in NVIDIA, we're not in NVIDIA, we're not in any semiconductor trades right now. But if we were, we would still be practicing our cascading stops and our risk management system that we write a lot about in our Clarity Weekly. Our first level, we would be looking at a stop underneath this market structure right here, possibly even as high as a failure to close this gap. If this gap up were to lose, and we started seeing some downside to this structure right here, we would want our first stop to take us out right in this range right here. A second stop would probably be underneath the failure of this doji candle and underneath these moving averages right here. And if we saw further downside and we saw NVIDIA losing this entire reaccumulation structure, and that if we saw volume coming in to support the downside of the trade, we would want a larger stop to be right in this range right here. This is just risk management. We take it very seriously. Protecting the profits that we generate is something that is of utmost importance. And so we write a lot about it in Clarity and we try to share it with our members. Hopefully this explanation was helpful. When we look at the daily chart, we see bullish signs everywhere. We see RSI residing in the bullish side of its range. We see support pushing off of the shorter term moving averages. And again, volume demonstrating demand greater than supply conditions. That's all the time we've got for NVIDIA this week. We'll see you next week.